Good day everyone! I am your science teacher for today, Teacher Andres. In today's video lesson, you will be learning the lesson about biodiversity. In this video lesson, we will focus on the given learning competency, which focuses on relate species extinction to the failure of population of organisms to adapt to abrupt changes in the environment. Our first video lesson for this learning competency is all about biological diversity. With this lesson, we have specific targets. First, define biodiversity. Second, make a list of human activities and its effects in the reduction of species diversity. And lastly, realize the importance of biodiversity. Are you ready, class? To start our video lesson properly, please prepare your pen and science notebook. Remember, you are expected to write your answers in every question or activity in this video lesson. And take note, your science teacher will collect your output for this video lesson and evaluate your answers. So let's start, class. To check your prior knowledge about this lesson, let us start with this first task, the try this. For the direction, answer the following questions by writing the letter of the correct answer. Number 1. What is biodiversity? A. All the different types of organisms on Earth. B. A group of individuals of the same species living in an area. C. A group of populations of different species living in the same area. D. A group of organisms that have the same structure and can reproduce with one another. Number 2. Which of the following human activities does not cause the reduction of species diversity? A. Fish farming. B. Hunting of animals. C. Overuse of fertilizers. D. Introduction of species. Number 3. Which of the following terms defined as a group of individuals of the same species living in an area? A. Community. B. Ecosystem. C. Population. D. Species. Number 4. Which of the following statements best describe the importance of biodiversity? A. It is an indicator such as the number of species in a given area which can help in monitoring certain aspects of biodiversity. B. It gives a positive association between members of different species. C. Greater species diversity ensures natural sustainability for all life forms. D. It describes the role of an organism within an ecosystem. Number 5. Which of the following factors does not influence the change in population in biodiversity? A. Direct drivers. B. Indirect drivers. C. Invasive species. Or D. Positive biodiversity. Good job! You have finished the first task of this lesson. Now, take time to process the information you acquired by accomplishing the second task. But before we proceed, kindly put this in your mind. Biodiversity is the measure of the number, variety, and variability of living organisms. It includes diversity within species, between species, and among ecosystems. The concept also covers how this diversity changes from one location to another and over time. Indicators such as the number of species in a given area can help in monitoring certain aspects of biodiversity. Now class, let's proceed on the second task of this video lesson, the do this. For the direction, the map below shows the population distribution of fish, water bugs, frogs, and water lily plants in a pond. Using the key, answer the following questions. The key are as follows. The blue one is for fish, the orange for water bug, the green for frogs, and the yellow is for water lily. We're ready, class? The illustration above shows the map of the different species, such as fish for the blue colored shape, water bugs for the orange colored shape, frogs for the green colored shape, and water lily for the yellow colored shape. After which, answer the following questions. Number 1. Which species has the largest population in the community? Number 2. What factors might influence a change in the population? Good job, class! You have finished the second task of this video lesson. I hope you have learned something about the previous task. Before we proceed with the next task or activity, kindly keep this in mind. Different parts of the ecosystem interact with one another. Changes to one part affect the other parts. When all the members of a species die, that species' place in the ecosystem is gone forever. At this time, class, we are now in our third task, the explore. In this task, you are going to perform an activity. Follow the given procedure. Let's start, class. Direction. Copy the table in your answer sheet. Below is the format of the table. List down human activities and write its corresponding effects on biodiversity. After which, you are going to answer the questions that follows. For the questions. Number 1. Which of the human activities that you have listed has the greatest impact on biodiversity? Number 2, what possible solution can you suggest to limit the effects of human activities to biodiversity? Good job again, class! You have finished the third task of this video lesson. I hope that you were able to answer all the questions of the activity. So, to give you a better understanding about biodiversity, kindly read and understand the following key points. Keep this in mind. The variety of life on Earth, its biological diversity, is commonly referred to as biodiversity. The number of species of plants, animals, and microorganisms, the enormous diversity of genes in these species, the different ecosystems on the planet, such as deserts, rainforests, and coral reefs are all part of biologically diverse Earth. Appropriate conservation and sustainable development strategies attempt to recognize this as being integral to any approach to preserving biodiversity. Almost all cultures have their roots in our biological diversity in some way or form. Declining biodiversity is therefore a concern for many reasons. The following are examples of human activities causes the reduction of species diversity. Human interactions within the ecosystem may have a positive impact on biodiversity, such as conservation, or a negative effect such as eutrophication. Negative effects include reduced populations, reduced biodiversity, or even extinction. Overuse of fertilizers can cause eutrophication and reduce biodiversity. Fish farming also can reduce biodiversity. Introduction of non-indigenous species can reduce biodiversity. Maintaining biodiversity. Positive human impacts on biodiversity. Areas like tropical rainforests have millions of different species and are very biodiverse. Other areas like the polar regions have far fewer species and are less biodiverse. The increase in the human population and waste it produces, deforestation, peat bog destruction, and global warming are all reducing biodiversity. Conservation helps reverse this. Conservation is the preservation of ecosystems and the organisms that live within them. Why biodiversity is important? Biodiversity boosts ecosystem productivity, where each species, no matter how small, all have an important role to play. Example: a larger number of plant species means a greater variety of crops. Greater species diversity ensures natural sustainability for all life forms. Healthy ecosystems can better withstand and recover from a variety of disasters. Factors influencing the change in population. We have, first, the direct drivers. And what is direct drivers? Direct drivers have a direct impact on the biodiversity of an ecosystem. Examples of direct drivers include fertilizer and insecticide use, and overhunting. Biotic factors in an ecosystem are divided into producers, consumers, and decomposers. These factors have to be maintained in a certain ratio for the ecosystem to thrive. Factor, we have the indirect drivers. Indirect drivers also affect biodiversity. For instance, industrialization and overpopulation could lead to deforestation, depriving biotic factors of their natural habitat. Other indirect effects include the byproducts of industrialization, like acid rain, which causes a decline in the number of plants and animals. Lastly, we have invasive species as one of the factors. The U.S. Environmental Protection Agency describes invasive species as one of the largest threats to our terrestrial, coastal, and freshwater ecosystem. Invasive species are not native to an ecosystem. When these species are introduced to an ecosystem, they can quickly overwhelm the natural habitats, competing with native species for limited resources and eventually causing a decline in native numbers. Also, invasive species can change the food web in an ecosystem by destroying or replacing native food sources. The invasive species may provide little to no food value for wildlife. Invasive species can also alter the abundance of diversity of species that are important habitat for native wildlife. To help you more understand biodiversity, let's watch the following videos.
Biodiversity is a term that represents the total variety of all life on Earth. That's a big thing to sum up. Thousands of different wild habitats, millions of different species, billions of different individuals, and the trillions of different characteristics they all have. the total biodiversity of our planet is immense. Which is a good thing, because the more biodiversity, the more secure all life on Earth is, including ourselves. Only when life is at its most varied, vigorous, biodiverse, can we hope to thrive. We may not know it, but we need towering forests across 1/3 of the land surface to lock away carbon and keep the climate stable. We need millions of pollinators and billions of soil organisms and megatons of plankton to keep the food we eat in supply. We need strange plants deep in jungles to create our medicines, and coral reefs and mangrove swamps to protect the coasts we depend upon. Our planet's biodiversity provides all the things we need for free. But it will only do so if there's lots of it, and at the moment it's under attack. In the last 50 years, our activities have dramatically reduced biodiversity across the globe. We've snuffed out habitats, reduced populations of wild animals by 60%, and even driven whole species extinct. The number of lions in Africa has dropped by 65%. The number of individual flying insects in Europe has dropped by 75%. The number of bluefin tuna in the Pacific has dropped by 95%. Biodiversity is dropping everywhere and fast. This is catastrophic for nature and therefore ourselves. We talk about climate change a lot, but biodiversity loss is as important an issue. How do we stop this loss of life? How do we ensure that biodiversity, our planet's vital statistic, begins to increase again? In fact, we already know exactly what to do. Follow Our Planet, visit ourplanet.com and watch the series on Netflix.
Irreversible damage are the worst way in a lifetime. Nearly 1 million species are at risk of extinction. Biodiversity is all about the variety of life. It has to do with animal life, plant life, bacteria, where we find these different organisms, what kind of habitats they flourish in. We really rely on biodiversity for maintaining healthy, robust, high-functioning ecosystems. As humans, we would be in great peril if we continue to lose biodiversity at the rate at which it's occurring currently.
And that's because of us. Things we are doing to the land, waters, that are causing the loss of these species. That's a big problem because these species play important roles in the ecosystems in which they occur. They can be pollinators, they can be creatures that help provide food we eat, shelter we live in, and at the same time they can be sources of new medicines, new breakthroughs that will help us lead better lives. Historically, the biggest threats to biodiversity have been destruction of natural ecosystems to make way for property, overexploitation of wildlife, spread of non-native or invasive species, and increasingly we're seeing climate change as a serious threat to biodiversity.
We also know that healthy ecosystems can be part of the solution to climate change. So forests and mangroves, these are ecosystems that are complex, but when they're healthy, they can store a lot of carbon, and so that can help mitigate the effects of climate change.
My graduate students, postdocs, and I are focused on a single problem. How do we find room for biodiversity in increasingly crowded, hot, humid? We've got to have more parks and protected areas. We need to develop more sustainable agricultural practices. harvested, and of course, have to tackle the issue.
A dire warning on climate change.
You're battling Mother Nature, you're likely to
The
lose.
damage is particularly devastating for farmers.
Irreversible damage.
The worst flooding in a lifetime.
Nearly 1 million species are at risk of extinction.
Biodiversity is all about the variety of life. It has to do with animal life, plant life, bacteria, where we find these different organisms, what kind of habitats they flourish in. We really rely on biodiversity for maintaining healthy, robust, high-functioning ecosystems. As humans, we would be in great peril if we continue to lose biodiversity at the rate at which it's occurring currently.
And that's because of us. It's the things we are doing to the lands and the waters that are causing the loss of these species. That's a big problem for us because these species can play important roles in the ecosystems in which they occur. They can be the pollinators, they can be the creatures that help to provide the food we eat, the shelter we live in, and at the same time they can be sources of new medicines and new breakthroughs that will help us lead better lives. Historically, the biggest threats to biodiversity have been the destruction of natural ecosystems to make way for croplands, the overexploitation of wildlife, the spread of non-native or invasive species, and increasingly we're seeing climate change as a serious threat to biodiversity.
We also know that healthy ecosystems can be part of the solution to climate change. So forests, mangroves, these are ecosystems that are complex, but when they're healthy, they can store a lot of carbon, and so that can help mitigate the effects of climate change.
My graduate students, postdocs, and I are focused on a single question. How do we find room for biodiversity in an increasingly crowded, hot, and hungry world? We've got to have more parks and protected areas. We need to develop more sustainable agricultural practices, manage our fisheries so that they are not over-harvested, and of course, we have to tackle the issue of climate change.
Biodiversity is the variety of life, as we saw in this video. There are thought to be 8.7 million species on planet Earth, and as we saw in this video, biodiversity is of utmost importance to humans. The loss of one key species can have a detrimental impact on many levels, from other species of animals to plants to the physical environment, as shown by wolves. Human activities are reducing biodiversity. Our future depends upon maintaining a good level of biodiversity, and so we need to start taking measures to try and stop the reduction. In this video, we're going to look at how humans are negatively impacting biodiversity. Here are some of the main human-induced threats facing biodiversity. As the world population has grown from 1.5 billion in 1900 to nearly 7.5 billion people today, unsurprisingly, the land use has changed. Habitats have been destroyed in favor of agriculture, forestry, fishing, urbanization, and manufacturing. Unsurprisingly, habitat loss has greatly reduced species richness. Habitat fragmentation has also meant that populations have been split into smaller subunits, which then, when faced by challenging circumstances, have not been able to adapt and survive. After habitat loss, overharvesting has had a huge effect on biodiversity. Humans historically exploit plant and animal species for short-term profit. If a resource is profitable, we develop more efficient methods of harvesting it, inevitably depleting the resource, as is currently happening with fishing and logging. The exploited species then needs protection. The difficulty is that the demand then outstrips the supply, and so the resource value rises. This increases the incentive to extract the resource and leads to the final collapse of the population, as happened with whales, elephants, spotted cats, cod, tuna, and many more species. Human activities are polluting the air and water. Toxic discharge into water from industrial processes, unsurprisingly, has a negative effect on local aquatic species by killing, weakening, or affecting their ability to reproduce. Another big water pollution problem is eutrophication, which we'll look at in detail in this video. Phosphorus and nitrogen in fertilizers run off agricultural fields and pass into rivers. These surplus nutrients cause algae to bloom, which then starves other aquatic species of oxygen and light, causing them to die. Acid rain is a consequence of humans polluting the air. This causes lakes and water bodies to become more acidic, killing fish, mollusks, amphibians, and many other species. A huge impact humans have had on planet Earth is the introduction of alien species to habitats. In fact, it is estimated that on any given day there are 3,000 species in transit aboard ocean-going vessels. Alien species can cause problems in a number of ways. Pause the video and have a look. Throughout the Earth's history, there have been periods of rapid climate change that have led to mass extinction events. We are currently in a period of fluctuating climate, but nearly all scientists agree that human activities like burning fossil fuels are speeding up global warming. We don't know how much climate change is going to affect biodiversity in the future, but it is predicted to be huge. Loss of sea ice and ocean acidification are already causing huge reductions in biodiversity. Climate change alters temperature and weather patterns, with changing patterns of rainfall and drought expected to have significant impacts on biodiversity. So there you have a selection of human-related impacts on biodiversity. There are many more, which with a quick search on the internet will bring up. If you want to understand why we should care about maintaining biodiversity, watch this video.
I hope you have understand what biodiversity is, based from the video you've watched and the key points you have read. Now, let's check your understanding about biodiversity by accomplishing the task on apply what you have learned. For task A, list 3 ways on how you can preserve biodiversity in your locality. Task B, copy the table in your answer sheet and answer what is being asked. Human activities such as road widening, rice fields turned into residential or commercial centers. Hooray! You have finished the task for apply what you have learned. Make sure, class, that you have answered all the questions on this task. Following is your reflection. At this time, you are going to complete the following statements as your reflection. First, I have learned that. And second, I wish to ask my teacher about. At this moment, we will proceed on the reinforcement, in which you are going to conduct an interview to local officials about some local policies and guidelines that help preserve local biodiversity. Class, you can ask assistance from your parents or guardians for this matter. And remember, you are going to take notes all the needed information regarding this topic. Good luck, class! For the word bank, the following are the terms used in this video lesson. First, abiotic means non-living things. Biodiversity refers to the variety of life in an area. Biotic means living things. Community, all interacting living things within an ecosystem. Eutrophication, the process by which a body of water becomes enriched in dissolved nutrients that stimulate the growth of aquatic plant. Life usually resulting in the depletion of dissolved oxygen. Population, all members of one specific species or groups of species living in the world or particular ecosystem. And lastly, species, a group of organisms that have certain characteristics in common and are able to interbreed. At this moment, class, we are now on the last task of this video lesson, in which you are going to assess what you have learned. Answer the following questions by writing the letter of the correct answer. For number 1, what is biodiversity? A. All the different types of organisms on the earth. B. A group of individuals of the same species living in an area. C. A group of populations of different species living in the same area. Or D. A group of organisms that have the same structure and can reproduce with one another. Number 2. Which of the following statements best describe the importance of biodiversity? A. It is an indicators such as the number of species in a given area which can help in monitoring certain aspects of biodiversity. B. It gives a positive association between members of different species. C. Greater species diversity ensures natural sustainability for all life forms. And D. It describes the role of an organism within an ecosystem. Number 3. What are invasive species? A. These include fertilizer and insecticide use in overhunting. B. It describes the role of an organism within an ecosystem. C. These are one of the largest threats to our terrestrial, coastal, and freshwater ecosystems. And D. This includes the byproducts of industrialization, like acid rain, which causes a decline in the number of plants and animals. Number 4. How invasive species affects biodiversity? A. It can change the food web in an ecosystem by destroying or replacing native food sources. B. It may provide little to no food value for wildlife. C. It can alter the abundance of diversity of species that are important to habitat for native wildlife. Or D. All of this. Last number 5. Which of the following human activities does not cause the reduction of species diversity? A. Fish farming. B. Hunting of animals. C. Overuse of fertilizers. And D. Introduction of species. Thank you for watching. See you again in our next video lesson. So stay tuned. Goodbye!